Thank you. We have a quorum now. I'm Councilmember Jose Huizar. I'm joined by Koretz and Zine. This is a meeting of the Energy and Environment Committee. We could go through the agenda first.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Rafael Prado with the CLA's office. Mr. Chairman, item number 1 relates to DRP report relative to the status of its 2012-2014 power rate proposal and community outreach efforts. With regard to that item, the following items, that is about a 30-minute presentation, so what we'd like to recommend is run through 2 through 5 first, and then head back to item number 1.
Okay.
With respect to number 2, we got a request from the department to continue that matter for 2 weeks while the board reviews the matter.
So without objection, we'll continue item number 2.
Okay. And in terms of our office, we'd like to recommend for consent item number 5, which relates to a public works report requesting authority to submit applications to EPA for brownfield assessments, property assessments. Okay. It's a simple authority.
Without objection, we'll put that on consent. Okay. That brings us back to item number 3, correct?
Yes, number 3. Number 3, DWP report relative to proposed agreement with Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories to provide materials and services for substation automation project.
Welcome, and if you could please introduce yourselves and give a brief explanation as to the purpose of this agreement and anything else you'd like to share with the committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Pruitt of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. I'm the project manager for the substation automation project in regards here to agreement 47038-1 Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories Incorporated for substation automation materials and services. The term of the agreement is for 7 years for a not to exceed amount of $71.5 million. Purpose is to provide materials and services necessary to complete the substation automation project, which includes upgrades to 198 stations within the power system, 120 of which have been upgraded, and some limited retrofit work to meet Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and North American Electric Reliability Corporation critical infrastructure protection standards as required, and 78 remaining stations to be fully upgraded and automated. The benefits are to reduce operational maintenance expenses, increase reliability, reduce capital cost of future facilities, and improve operational capabilities.
Thank you. I understand that this is a 7-year agreement, correct?
Correct.
And it will upgrade close to 200 electrical substations and related components. And can you describe what a substation is and its role in the electrical transmission system? I mean, everything you said right now sounds fine and dandy, but in real person terms, what does this mean?
A substation is a power handling facility used to transmit or distribute power. It can be used for anything from a power generating station down to a smaller distributing station or an industrial station, which is sometimes customer specific.
Okay, and the report here states that there was some initial startup problems with the project about 10 years ago. In that period, it involved several different engineering firms. Have those operational issues gone away, or how do we know that we're not going to have similar types of problems?
In developing the new agreement before you today, lessons learned were primary importance in incorporating developing the new agreement. And the previous agreements were new in nature to the department. Technology was new at that time. And from those lessons learned and a better understanding of these complicated automation systems.
Sir, my name is Robert Roth, CIO's office. Mm-hmm. An additional function of these new contracts that's different than the previous contracts is that the work is to be done on a per station basis, whereas in the past it was for the term of the contract, not on a deliverable basis. So for each of these substations, there is a set amount, and it provides some protection to the department to ensure the work gets done.
Okay, and let's walk through the budget. The report to the DWP Commission says the project started with $51 million, but was scaled back due to rising costs. Work continued until inventory is largely installed. Today, the project has expended $188 million, is that correct? No. Total cost so far? And
For contractual expenses,
yes.
labor and material.
Eric Hartman with DWP, Manager of Major Transmission Distribution Projects. That's the total expenditures. That's including our in-house labor as well as contractual labor.
Okay, so that's the whole project, yes?
That's the whole
That's the whole
project.
project.
And this is out of a total of a identified $373 million budget. Is that correct?
Correct.
So here we have now a request for $71 million to complete the project with this firm. And so what's remaining? What else do you need to do to complete this with the other $100 or so million?
What's remaining to do is, in the course of the work that's been done,
It's the labor. It's the physical, our own in-house construction forces will be actually installing this equipment in our stations.
So that's going to, and it's all labor,
Right.
$100 million or so.
oh,
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any questions or comments from staff, my colleagues?
Schweitzer Engineering, how long have they been in business?
I think about 40 years, just from recollection.
Were they involved in the previous where we had some problems?
No.
No.
Who was the previous vendor?
I believe that was Convergent.
What happened to them?
They are retained only for materials and services, maintenance support on the existing systems.
We have a separate contract.
Separate agreement for them.
Did we
right
have problems with them before? According to the document here, apparently there were higher than expected costs, and the scope was reduced. Convergence. If they didn't do what they're supposed to do, and the costs exceeded what it was supposed to, we're talking millions of dollars, $50 million, $70 million, and we're talking major expenditures. Why would we keep dealing with them? They didn't perform in '02 to expectations.
They're on board purely to maintain the equipment that they were responsible for in the old contract. They're no longer going to be involved in this new aspect. And as soon as we upgrade those other 120 stations and retrofit, then they will not need to be involved.
Then they'll be out.
They'll be out, yes.
And how
Sir-
many companies do this type of work, other than Schweitzer?
We had 6, I'd say.
They went RFPs and bids,
We had
6
6
bidders.
qualified respondents.
and this was the lowest bid,
This was the highest scoring bid.
highest scoring, not the lowest bid.
Lowest in terms of,
Dollars.
no.
Okay. We need to get the bang for the buck.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you then. With no objections, we'll move this item forward.
Okay. Recommend approval. Okay.
Approve this item.
Number 4, Board of Public Works report relative to proposed MOU between the city and the Council for Watershed Health for the
Thank you for your
Elmer Avenue
presentation.
SIL project. Staff from the CAO and Bureau of Sanitation.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm David Harana with the Office of the CAO. Before you have a request from the Bureau of Sanitation for approval of an MOU between the City of Los Angeles and the Council for Watershed Health to implement the Elmer Avenue Paseo Proposition O Clean Water Project and to expend $129,000 worth of Proposition O money. In addition to the Bureau report, you have a report from our office. We reviewed the MOU and are making some suggestions to help strengthen the oversight and use of Proposition O funds and to help strengthen and improve the invoicing and billing function. In addition, we're suggesting that the Bureau provide a little bit greater context on the project and a project update to the Administrative Oversight Committee for the Proposition O program. Joining me are Kendrick Okuda from the Bureau of Engineering and Mr. Shahram Karagani from the Bureau of Sanitation, and there's also a representative from the Council for Watershed Health. We're all here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. My question on this says that the original estimated cost for this project was about $1.2 million, and now it is estimated that it is $675,000. Why the decrease?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Shahram Karagani, Bureau of Sanitation. The project have two pieces to it. One is the alley, which is before you, the MOU, which is going to green the alley, and the other project is going to be a series of best management practices in upstream. The MOU before you is for the alley, and that's the one that is $600,000.
Gotcha. And how much has DWP contributed to this project?
The Water and Power Department has committed $125,000.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? No?
No.
Okay. We'll move this item without objection.
Recommend approval of the CO report.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That leaves us with item number 1.
Okay.
Department of Water and Power report relative to the status of the 2012-2014 power rate proposal and community outreach efforts. Oh, you had a card on this one? Oh. Do you want to pull it back?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for coming today to present a status on the DWP rate proposal. The council actually got a glimpse of the proposal when DWP presented its preliminary budget last month. And with today's overview and update, this committee begins a thorough review of DWP's revenue needs and its infrastructure investments. As we do this, we want to make sure that the ratepayers advocate is involved and engaged in each step of the way. And this council supports the efforts of the department to shift to more sustainable practices, both environmentally and financially. These two things are necessary to truly protect our residents and our business customers. But we want to know, and I think the public wants to know as well, specific infrastructure investments that can be expected through this. And we also are interested in knowing how the DWP will handle its long-term financial outlook, including plans to manage costs while maintaining the service levels it needs. And I am interested in looking through the discussion we have today how we can move forward in combining some of our requests for increases for water and power, and if that's possible, not to treat them as two separate items, so that if we're going to the public, we're not saying, hey, here we're asking you to raise your rates in power, and now we're going to come back to you and we're asking you to raise your rates in water. The public should look at the full picture and not be surprised that we bring one and then the other, and we have this continuous discussions about rate increases in the city for these services. So I know there's been some preliminary discussions to see if that's possible to combine those two, but I'm very interested in hearing about that today. So with that, I don't know if my colleagues have any remarks before they begin their presentation, open their presentation. Okay. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilmember Wuzar. My name is Phil Leiber. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Department of Water and Power. So I wanted to just give you a brief overview of the status of our outreach efforts that we've been conducting for the past several weeks, and then give a somewhat condensed version of the presentation that we've actually been going around the city providing to the public.
Okay.
So this is an overview of the meetings that we've held so far in this current phase of the outreach. And I do say current phase because this is really a discussion that the department has begun last summer with the public, talking about our rate needs for the upcoming 3 years. We kind of put that effort on hold in having the RPA come on board, but with his arrival, starting work in February, we've now formally restarted the rates proposal process. We have provided our formal power rate proposal to the ratepayer advocate about 2 weeks ago, so he's hard at work assessing that. And in the meantime, we've been talking about our proposal across the city. We've held 14 sessions so far. There have been 7 regional meetings held across the city, including in the Valley. We have plans to talk to about 9 other groups. We've had 6 meetings so far and 3 planned. We're also beginning outreach to the public in individual council member districts. We had 1 session last night in Councilmember Labange's district, and we've got a total of about 7 additional sessions scheduled. So the dates for those are shown on the right-hand side of this slide. In addition, we have other upcoming meetings that are going to run through at least mid-June. So there are lots of opportunities for people to come and ask questions and understand our proposal. And I should also point out this is in addition to the other forums that people have had to learn about the proposal, including our board meetings and these committee meetings. So we have been talking about what is driving the need for rate increases, and it is largely regulatory mandates, and we're going to talk more about those today. And we're going to first cover the issues confronting our power system, and John Dennis from our Power Systems Engineering Group is here to begin that discussion.
Good afternoon, council members. John Dennis, Director of Power System Engineering. We have 3 areas that we'll talk about, the changes that we have to go through for our power system over this next century, and primarily those areas are replacement, reliability, and then opportunities for our customer. In the replacement area, we're talking about rebuilding some of our local power plants to meet the regulatory requirements. On reliability, we'll talk about some of the common elements of our power system of poles and transformers and cables. And then under the customer opportunities, we'll talk about those areas such as energy efficiency and solar power for our customers. On the next slide, it just shows the major transformation that our power system is undergoing. Over the past 100 years in the development of our city, and as the city grew, the power system evolved and grew with it. But we see that over the next 15 years, we're going to replace over 70% of our power system in those 15 years in order to stay compliant with some of our most current rules related to CO2 reduction and once-through cooling and meeting some of our new renewable requirements. So this is going to, over that period of time, it's going to take consistent additional investments to keep us on track. And those major areas you can start to see from those charts is that our energy efficiency is going to grow sizably. Our RPS, the renewable energy, is going to go from what's today at 20% and it'll go up to 33%. And then our natural gas will grow sizably as we start to offset coal and meet some of those needs of our growing system. And so with this, the future picture, that gives you kind of a snapshot of what that would look like at approximately the year 2030 as we migrate to that. On the next slide, one of the major areas that we see that's a sizable effort is our rebuilding of our local power plants. And there are several benefits or values that we have out of this. One is a large issue that we worked through last year with our State Water Resources Board, and that is to get our 3 coastal power plants off once-through cooling, or use of ocean water for cooling our power plants. But many of these were built in the late 50s and early 60s in that time frame, and so as we're also getting them off once-through cooling, we'll be able to improve the reliability by putting in new technology. We'll improve our heat rate with efficiency, and we'll reduce our emissions of CO2 and NOx that contribute to the formation of smog and some of those other areas. So we have some sizable improvements, and right now, under construction today, we have about 450 people on our job site out at the Haynes Generating Station down in Long Beach, and that's a sizable project to get our facility there, units 5 and 6, off once-through cooling. And immediately after that, we'll be working on our Scattergood Generating Station, which is out there by Los Angeles International Airport, and to remove Unit 3 from the once-through cooling, and that job will be finished by 2015. So we will be issuing RFPs, soliciting opportunities to bid on that, and plan to be awarding contracts by the end of this year. But with that migration plan, basically it takes a very aggressive schedule to 2029, and by that date, you see that the systematic reduction of these units, taking them off once they're cooling. This really is a compressed schedule for us. Every step will have to be made precise, and basically with a limited real estate on these locations. I think our general manager has said several times, this will be like changing an engine on your airplane while you're still flying. But we believe we have the clear steps to do that at the real estate, at those locations, and to accomplish this and still meet the needs. Today we use, or in the past, we were using about 2 billion gallons of ocean water every day. Today we're down to about 1.5 billion gallons of that ocean water. And by 2015, when we finish Scattergood, we'll be down to half of that. So we're reducing that incrementally as we go, and by 2029, we'll be completely off the use of ocean water for cooling. On the next opportunities for reliability and for our customer opportunities, Bill Glaus is going to take on that next slide.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon, council members. My name is Bill Glaus. I manage resource planning and solar energy development for the Department of Water and Power. This slide shows our plan for increasing our renewable energy supply. In the past, we had voluntarily looked at expanding renewable energy. We achieved 20% renewables in 2010, the first major utility in the state of California to do so. We also set a goal of achieving 33% renewables by 2020. Last year, our state legislature solidified those goals in legislation that was passed, SB 2 in the first extraordinary session of the state legislature. And SB 2 now requires all utilities in the state to achieve 33% renewables by 2020. We are in good position right now. We expect to achieve all of these goals. There are interim goals as well in the legislation. We expect to have an average of 20% renewables between 2011 and 2013. The next target is 25% renewables in 2016, and then of course 33% renewables in 2020 and thereafter. One of the things we look at in developing renewable energy resources is utilizing our existing transmission resources and also looking to develop local distributed generation, primarily local solar. So those are two major areas that we're looking to develop. An example of some of the solar that we're looking to develop here is a 10 megawatt plant at our Adelanto converter station out in the high desert that will be commissioned here in June. The largest municipal solar plant in the country. We're very proud of that plant. We have a very aggressive solar incentive program to encourage our customers to put solar on their facilities as well. As you can see, we'll be expanding our geothermal activities in the future as well. And we're very anxious and excited about expanding our renewables. But this is not cheap. Renewables are much more expensive than our conventional sources of generation. So there are rate impacts that we will be seeing. Next slide takes a look at probably one of our core values, which is serving electricity reliably. As you can see, this chart shows what we have done over the years in terms of expenditures for replacing our aging infrastructure. As Mr. Dennis pointed out, we have wooden poles, cables, transformers that are on our system that are aging and need to be replaced. We had a significant uptick in the amount of outages we saw from the mid-2000 to 2008 timeframe. And that was primarily because we were scaling back on the amount of money that we spent on maintaining our system and replacing that aging infrastructure. So in 2007, 2008 timeframe, we started really taking a serious look at replacing that infrastructure, and we increased our spending, and as you can see, eventually we saw reductions in those outages. But one of the things I really want to point out is that today we are seeing frequency of outages and duration of outages about double what we saw 10 years ago. So the system is aging, and it's very important to be replacing that infrastructure before the outages happen. Next year, or this current fiscal year, we actually had a $90 million reduction in our funding for this program, primarily because we did not have the funding available to budget that. And we are seeing the next line you'll see there in the future is that going up, actually the outage is going up. It stops in 10-11, but that line will be going up here, primarily because of our reductions that we've seen in our expenditures. So we are looking to increase our expenditures this next fiscal year, but it'll still be at the rate that we were looking at 2 years ago. So that's not enough to keep up with the infrastructure, and the outages will go higher. Next slide is our energy efficiency programs. This is an area that we want to emphasize significantly. Energy efficiency assists us in meeting our goals of coal divestiture and renewable portfolio standard. The less energy we have to deliver to our customers, if they're saving the energy, the less we have to build. And that means the less renewable projects we have to build, and our coal replacement becomes easier to replace our coal facilities. It also allows our customers to reduce their energy consumption, so any rate actions that take place could be offset by our customers reducing their need for electricity. AB 2021 is a piece of legislation that was passed a few years back that requires us that has a goal of achieving 10% energy efficiency. So that is our goal, is to have 10% of our energy supply be met by energy efficiency programs, customer energy efficiency programs. And so what that's going to do for us is basically be looking at expanding what we have in our budget to by about $40 million a year for the next 2 years to keep on track to achieve that 10% goal for energy efficiency. The next slide talks a little bit about some of our customer programs that we have available. Of course, energy efficiency is one of those programs, but two other programs that are pretty exciting for our customers are solar-based. And we have both our solar incentive program, which has a chart on the right there that shows what we've done over the last 10 years or so here. It's a very, very, the program is very, very popular right now, probably the most popular that we've ever seen it. We have over 50 megawatts of solar projects that have been installed, and our customers are installing about 2 megawatts a month going forward here. So we'll be at 150 megawatts in the next few years of customer installed solar. This is solar that they can use to offset their electricity use. Another program that we are just rolling out this week and that you approved over the last month or so here is our feed-in tariff. And we're going to be launching that on Thursday. We've had a number of public outreach meetings and workshops, and we're excited to see that program get off the ground. And that'll be bringing us another 150 megawatts of local solar. The benefit of local solar is that it does bring jobs to Los Angeles. And so in addition to helping us achieve our renewable goals, it's also helping the local economy by expanding jobs for installation of solar. And so we do have a budget for the next 3 years of about $65 to $68 million to promote both our solar incentive program as well as our feed-in tariff.
Okay, so we're doing a lot of good things to improve reliability, to transition to a cleaner power supply. Unfortunately, there is a cost involved in all of this, and the costs of these programs are outlined on this slide. You can see that the funding is going to need to increase year to year on the order of about $140 million a year to accommodate all of these programs. So that is really exactly what's driving the rates. Those are three major programs of the overall power system budget, which is overviewed on the next slide here. It takes about $3 billion to produce and deliver the power to customers. And where that money goes is outlined here. Right off the bat, about 40% is the direct cost of producing the power in terms of payments to third parties. We don't own all of the generating plants that meet our customers' demand. About 30% of the total budget just goes in terms of payments to those providers. It takes about 12% of the budget to buy the fuel to run our own generating plants. That's natural gas, that's coal, to a small extent nuclear fuel. Only about 25% of the budget relates to the staff at the department who do all of this work. And that's in contrast to other departments in the city where it would be upwards of 80 or 90%. The other major portion of the budget is debt service and interest. That's shown on the left here. That's about 18% of the power system budget. That's just paying for the past infrastructure investments that we've made. We've done bond funding to pay for a lot of that, and we have to pay that back over time. Over on the right, we see some of the other components of the budget. About 4% is for other supplies, materials, third-party payments. And then there's the 8% city transfer, which is very common for municipally owned utilities, that they make a payment to essentially the owners of the utility, which are the public. So that's 8% that's budgeted to go to the general fund. And then every year we budget a small cushion in the event we get our expenditures too low or there are unforeseen things that come up. We budget a 2% cushion that shows up as net income, and that would typically go to fund the capital program in the event it's not spent. The issue we face is we haven't had rate increases for 3 years in terms of base rates and for 2 years in terms of our energy cost adjustment factor. We've been fortunate in that we've been in an environment with very low natural gas prices, or we would have felt even more pressure there. So that's relieved some of the pressure. But the fact is we can't find the money to do all of these mandated requirements without increasing rates. And that's really shown by this chart here, which shows 4 years, and you can see that things are in balance for the first 2 years here. We show this is where the money goes, and this red line across the top is how much we're bringing in on current rates, and we have to keep that in balance. And as we look ahead to the next 2 years, we see a gap of about $150 million next year, and that grows to about $300 million in the following year. And if you just look at the numbers here, it's about $3 billion. Of $150 million gap represent about a 5% funding shortfall, and then it grows to about a 10% funding shortfall here. And if you want to know where the proposed rate increases come from, it's to exactly fill those gaps. So the next slide shows what we're proposing in terms of rate adjustments. And these columns show that on a system average basis, so this is across the various types of customers, residential and commercial, we need to increase rates by exactly that 10% that I just talked about. And that equates to about a 1.4 cent per kilowatt hour increase over the 2 years. So rates right now are at about 12.7 cents, and that's going to need to increase by about 1.4 cents over the 2 years. Now, in terms of what that means for actual customers, we show the impact on residential customers and commercial customers on the next slide. Here we show for a typical customer, and then here we show for a high-use customer. About 2/3 of our residential customers do use 500 kilowatt hours per month or less, and right now they're paying an average bill of about $65.79, and that's going to increase over the 2 years by about $3.35. Now, you'll note here that the percentage increase that we're showing is less than the system average, and that was by design. We have a tiered rate structure where we have 3 separate tiers for our electric rates. So we've tried to keep the rate increase as small as possible on that first tier and shift more of the increase onto the Tier 2 and Tier 3 rates. And we did that for a variety of reasons. We want to encourage conservation. We want to keep the impact to low-income customers as low as possible because we do have a fixed subsidy that isn't going to increase. So we've designed this to try to mitigate that impact to those customers. If for customers who are using more power, they're paying more of those Tier 2 and Tier 3 rates, they are going to face a somewhat higher percentage increase, a bit more than the system average increase of 10.5%. It's a total of about 13.5% over the 2 years. So that's the impact on the residentials. On the commercial customers, we didn't show typical bills because for commercial customers, their volumes really vary a lot. So we've just shown it in terms of cents per kilowatt hour. So for medium customers, their rate's about 12.4 cents, and that would go up about 1.5 cents over the 2 years. And the same thing for the larger customers. In terms of percentage increase, it's about the same. It's about at the system average rate. So where does this money go, and exactly what is behind these rate increases? This is just kind of summarizing the factors that were presented earlier. we mentioned that rates are going to need to go up by about 1.4 cents, and this shows exactly where that money's going. Breaks it down in terms of percentages and in terms of those fractions of a penny. And the first observation I would make here is the great majority of this increase is related to mandates. So if you add up these percentages in about this portion of the slide, it's about 73% of these cost increases are related to mandates. So it's not decisions that have been made here in the city of LA, but these are complying with state and federal mandates. So that includes rebuilding the power plants to comply with the Clean Water Act, which is prohibiting the use of ocean water cooling. That's driving about 31% of the increase. The need to comply with the 33% renewable mandate, that's about a quarter of the increase. And then the things that we think are of significant benefit to our customers, those two are mandated. The solar incentive program and the feed-in tariff, that's really helping us get to the 33% renewable mandate. And then the increase in, pardon me, I had those flipped around. The energy efficiency, getting to the 10% that's required by 2020, we're spending on that. And then the solar incentives, that's about 3% of the total. The one item here that in the short term you could say we have a little more discretion on, no one's ordering us to spend this amount of money in this year, would be for the reliability. But this is essentially as important as changing the oil in your car or painting your house. You can put it off for a short term, but ultimately you're going to pay a price in terms of reliability and having to spend more later. The other item here that's not a mandate, but we really don't have any choice in the matter, is as I mentioned, we're paying very low prices right now for natural gas, but that's not going to last forever. We expect those costs to go up gradually over time, so we have to budget for that. So in terms of our rates compared to the neighboring utilities, they're affordable today, and even with these proposed increases, they're still going to be a bargain compared to the neighboring utilities in Southern California. So our bills today, $65.79, would go up to $69.14. That's still lower than any of the other neighboring utilities. And we also know that they're facing many of the same cost pressures and issues that we have to deal with. So, for example, at the investor-owned utilities, they've made proposals to the Public Utilities Commission for significant increases over the well, this is pending, just announced right now. There may be more in the future there. The neighboring municipal utilities, they have not all announced the increases, but we know that they're looking at these pressures as well, so they may make some announcements soon. In terms of commercial rates, we show the same thing. Actually, I want to mention just one thing. So these rates do not include the city utility tax. That is shown along the bottom. So those do appear on the customer's bills. That's not money that goes to the department, but that does go to the city's general fund. And again, these are very common. Nearly every locale here has similar utility taxes. In terms of commercial rates, here too, the LA rates are lower currently than the neighboring utilities, and even with the increase, our rates are still going to be affordable. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn Singley to talk about some of the challenges in the water system.
Good afternoon. I'm the Director of Water Engineering and Technical Services for the water system. We'll start off with our strategic objectives for the water system. Certainly our local water supply, where we're looking to increase our recycled water contributions, our stormwater capture, customer conservation programs, and groundwater cleanup, which is a critical piece of that. Secondly, our safe drinking water program. For many years we've been involved in our requirements to cover reservoirs and bypass those reservoirs. Some of our trunk line replacements, which will help in managing our system, and just generally two major regulatory compliance issues with the Department of Public Health. Thirdly is our water system reliability program, replacing aging pipelines and related infrastructure. That's large trunk lines as well as mains, and we've had to pull back a little bit on that replacement of those mains. Right now we're at about 95,000 feet of main right now. We're trying to upgrade that to about 120,000 and then beyond. And that gets us from a 400-year replacement cycle down to about a 275-year replacement cycle, which isn't enough, but it's a step in the right direction. This is these are our projections of our sources of supply going on in the future. Right now, we get about 36% of our water from our aqueduct. When I started at the department about 30 years ago, that number was about 70% of our water supply was from the LA aqueduct that Mr. Mulholland provided for us, and we had about 15% that was supplied by MWD. Because of environmental regulations and uses in the Owens Valley, those numbers have been reduced, as well as the increasing demands to those numbers that we have today. The local groundwater is at 11% now. That's a little bit less than what we have had traditionally because we are losing some of the capacity of our wells because of some of the groundwater contamination issues, which we do have to address with some cleanup facilities. Into the future, we're looking at greatly expanding our local supplies and reducing our reliance on MWD and our imported supplies. So with our urban water management plan and our recycled water management plan, master plan, we have some increases in both local groundwater by cleaning up the basin, recycled water to 59,000 acre feet, which will include both non-potable reuse with the purple pipe and irrigation uses and groundwater recharge with advanced water treatment, as well as increased conservation, which will account for some of that demand, and stormwater capture, where we can use our spreading basins more efficiently and increase the capacities there, as well as some water transfers. And we do have a new facility going in right now in the Antelope Valley to be able to accommodate water transfers directly into our system from the State Water Project. And these are the numbers in each of those major areas that we'll be looking at as far as the increases as we go. Now, the 35-cent water quality increase that we had recently helps us tremendously, certainly through managing our increases for this year, but they are increasing each year as shown.
So this shows the entire budget for the water system. So it takes about $1 billion per year to procure and deliver the water to our customers. And just like the power system, the labor costs at the department are only about a quarter of the total. And like on the power side, where there was purchased power, here on the water side we have water purchases, and that's from the Metropolitan Water District, comprise about 20% of the total. Maintaining the infrastructure of the system and paying back the bonds that were used to fund those infrastructure investments, that's about 27% of the total. The other costs of materials, supplies, third-party contracts are about 17%. In here on the water side, it looks like more is being budgeted for net income, and that is essentially used to fund some of the capital investment needs so that not all of it is being funded through bonds. And then the conservation programs on the water side, very important, but are not a significant driver in terms of the cost, just about 1%. So here on the water side, as was mentioned with the water quality adjustment factor, there's really not much happening in the next fiscal year in terms of rate increases. These are based on our preliminary budget numbers that were submitted at the end of March. We're currently updating these numbers to reflect the final budget, and this first-year water rate increase, that's going to go away altogether, it looks like. We were showing it here about 0.5%. It looks like that's gone away. In the second year, starting in 2013, we'd be looking for about a 4.5% increase. Now, one thing that is important to note is this does not include the effect of purchased water. So we are dependent on that volatile Metropolitan Water District water. The amount we have to procure there varies greatly depending on our snowpack, and we are unfortunately moving from a very wet year into a dry year where we're going to be a lot more dependent on that water. So that will impact rates. That's a pure pass-through that's not shown here. In terms of the bill impact over the 2 years, again, we show for a typical residential customer, a high-use customer, and then for a commercial customer, we're looking at somewhere in the order of about a 6% increase for a typical customer, For a high-use customer, it actually turns out to be a slightly lower percentage. That's because of something that's happening in the first year with the way the current rate ordinance works. We're going to fix that in the second year to properly allocate those costs. That has to do with the purchased water factor in the Tier 2 is fixed. It doesn't reflect the higher costs that we're going to actually be facing this year. So that is something we'll fix in the second year. In terms of commercial customers, they'd be looking at about a 4.8% increase over the 2 years. And here too, our water bills compared to neighboring utilities, they're pretty affordable. The typical customer who uses about 1,200 cubic feet per month pays about $40 per month. That's inclusive of the recent increase in the water quality adjustment factor. And that's lower than any of the neighboring utilities or other major utilities in the state, where costs are nearly 50% higher than at the Department of Water and Power. So that concludes the discussion on the water system, and here I wanted to address what happens next and to speak to Councilmember Huizar's concern about having a single discussion on this. Initially, we were looking at perhaps having a power system proposal brought to the council in the summer and then deferring the discussion on the water system until the fall. We've now revisited that with the aim to having, one comprehensive discussion this summer. So that is what we're really aiming for here. In August, we would expect to bring our proposal for the consideration of this committee and the full council in August. Working back from there on the power side, our efforts are further along. We have provided a formal rate proposal to the ratepayer advocate about 2 weeks ago, and he's hard at work assessing that. What's remaining is he will issue a report sometime likely in late June, we expect, and then our board would potentially make some adjustments to our proposal based on that report, but act on it in the summer. I've shown a board meeting in July. That could actually take place in August, like for the water side as well. On the water system, we are aiming to have this council vote also in August. It's important to note that the water rates wouldn't change until July of the following year, but just in the effort to have all of the discussion at one time, we'd get it taken care of now. Looking back here, we've discussed our proposal publicly, but we haven't yet turned over our formal proposal to the ratepayer advocate. We're targeting to do that in about 2 weeks, and that would give Dr. Pickle about 2 months to assess our proposal on the water side. And just to summarize, the proposed rate changes are necessary to comply with these regulatory mandates, to address aging infrastructure both on the water side and the power side, and to the extent possible give customers opportunities to have more control of their bill, and on the power side the source of where their power is coming from.
Thank you. Just in general terms, it seems that we have a huge need, either because of mandates, future mandates, infrastructure improvements, that we are going to have a need for additional revenue in the future. Where does this take us this next, the increases we will see in the next 2 years? How much does that get us? So, for example, on the renewables, how far does that take us before we have to come back again? Well, I don't want to make it specific to any one source or requirement, but I think generally speaking, you get what I'm saying. How much of this great need does this buy us?
I do. That's an excellent question, and I'm glad you asked it, because we don't want to leave any misunderstanding that we're coming here for this, and that's the end of the story, that we won't be coming back for more adjustments in the future, because on a good side and a bad side, a lot of these mandates, it's not work that all has to be completed in the next year or two. It's work that has to be done over an extended period of time. Now, the good news is on that, we don't have to pay for all of that up front, but for example, on the renewable energy, there is a mandate that by 2020 we get to this level. So we don't have to get there overnight. We don't have to make all of the investments to do that in the next year or two. We're just getting in the next year or two to this level. But the funding that we're asking for now just gets us to this level. So we're going to have to come back in these subsequent years for additional funding to help us get to that goal. So that's the case on the renewable energy side. It's also the case in terms of rebuilding our power plants. We're asking for the funding to do this work. More work remains ahead of us. So there will need to be additional rate adjustments in the future to accommodate that work.
So keeping that in mind, we are doing a 2-year rate adjustment. We thought out 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line as to when are we going to come back with another request, and why do this from 2 years, not 3, to kind of, lessen the impact, the immediate impact, or perhaps keep it where it is, but take in some more of our future need into the 3rd year, since we're discussing this, and let customers adjust to the impact a few years and then come back. So what's your thinking on that in the long term?
That's another important consideration that we had to decide what to do on is, as we look ahead, we know there are further cost pressures, and we could have made a longer-term proposal. The factors that we had to weigh against that are, number one, we have a lot more certainty as to what the costs are in the next 2 years. As you get out further, there are still choices that could be made. Maybe costs will come down on some of these things. So we decided to ask for the funding for the next 2 years because we're very confident about what those requirements are. As we get further out, there's more leeway as decisions can be made. The other factor that weighed heavily in our thinking is just the timing for when we need to get all this done. If we had more time to talk about rates, we might have considered a longer-term proposal, say 3 or even 5 years. But because of the pressing need to get rate adjustments, particularly for the power system, in place this year as soon as possible, we didn't think it would be fair or practical to Dr. Pickle, who's arrived just a number of months ago, to ask him to do the analysis necessary to evaluate a much longer-term proposal. So we wanted to keep it concise and stand by numbers that we're very confident about. So those are the factors we weighed.
Great. Thank you. My other question is, I wanted to ask Mr. Pickle on the timeline, the last slide, but I want to open it up to my colleagues for their questions and comments, but I am interested later hearing from Mr. Pickle, either now or later, about what he thinks about that schedule there. So, would you want to talk about that now? And why don't we ask Mr. Pickle about that timeline and what you think about that timeline? Obviously, one of the biggest concerns that I hear about, both from my colleagues and the public, is the need to have our ratepayer advocate review have the appropriate time to review the proposed adjustments. And timing is one of them, since one, it took longer than expected for the city to hire Mr. Pickle, and secondly, once he was hired, it took longer than expected to get the resources necessary in his office. So here we are, you're getting this schedule. Any comments or thoughts on this?
We expect to be able to meet the schedule on power because we've been able to get council approval for contracting from PA Consulting, extending existing contracts, building on existing work. That contract has approved, except for some final legal changes that we expect to have resolved tomorrow. And on the water side, this schedule just got shortened up in the last week. It's unlikely we'll have more than one additional professional staff member on board by the time this needs to be completed, let alone started. So we will have to explore contracting alternatives for that as well.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from colleagues?
Yeah.
Mr. Zine?
The critical versus optional. Some are critical, some are optional. When we're looking at critical versus optional and the ratepayer, I will be very candid with you. The ratepayer advocate was put in a key position, paid for, to address these issues. If you come to council to ask for rate increases, I think it's going to be a very difficult task getting colleagues to support that without the independent analysis and review. That's, I mean, I'm not saying you don't need it, I'm not saying it's not critical, but the concern is we in this city had a ballot measure, the voters approved it, and then if we go and try something before it's vented, they're going to say it was very devious, it was underhanded, and I'm not willing to make that sacrifice. So as far as any rate increase, until we get the full analysis, I don't know how we could consciously make any recommendation, to be honest with you. The issue on the rate is one factor. PR Consulting's been on for a long time doing reports. Dr. Pickle, you've been in place how long now?
3 months.
Okay, and you're still putting together a crew.
Yes.
So I don't know how long that's going to take, but this was approved over a year ago, maybe longer than that, the position. It took a while to get you in place, et cetera. So while we're talking about this, which I consider a very substantial increase, in addition to the other increases that the folks of the city are going to see, it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse when it comes to what you're proposing, at least in my opinion. The question I have is the reaction when you've gone out to the community. You've gone to a number of community meetings. What's been the reaction? And it's vary in different parts of the city.
Well, if I could address both of your concerns.
Okay.
To be clear, we have no intent or no expectation that there are going to be rate increases without an analysis by the ratepayer advocate. So this schedule does provide for that. Now there is the question of, is this adequate time for the full analysis? And that is a valid concern. We are trying to move as quickly as we can and provide the information to Dr. Pickle, but we recognize that he's in a difficult position with a lot of work to accomplish and not nearly the staff needed to do it.
And the other concern I have is PR Consulting has done consulting work for the city before Dr. Pickle was put in place, before we had that position that's established, that's a paid-for position. We could get the same thing from PR Consulting and not have Dr. Pickle review anything, because basically they're going to issue their review and their report, which they've done in the past. And I think their rate is $375 an hour, if I'm not mistaken, or something in that arena.
Their contract is on a flat fee for fixed deliverables.
What's
It's
that
not
fee?
on an hourly rate.
What's that fee?
The total cost is $380,000 as passed by council.
I understand if it's an hourly rate, it's extremely expensive. So that's all coming out of what the ratepayers are paying for. The issue on mandates from the feds, from the state, is there any appropriations or just this is the way it's going to be and you go figure out how you can pay for it? Are there any assistance by those that are establishing these regulations?
For the most part, no. I say for the most part because there are some funding opportunities available, and we certainly look for those and take advantage of them where we can. And just as one example of that, we just in the past week or so were told from the state that we're going to be offered a 0% loan to do some of the reservoir covering work that is mandated. And that is a very good opportunity for us because it's about a $200 million loan, and having to pay 0% will save us about $10 million a year.
And that loan's from the state?
That's from the state.
The bankrupt state?
Those are actually EPA dollars that are filtering down to the
federal
states.
dollars.
They're federal
Okay.
dollars.
I shouldn't say bankrupt. I'd say in great debt. Another representing the San Fernando Valley. We talked about the second meter program and to have that promoted in the San Fernando Valley because of the water rate issue. The solar issue for Pacific Palisades is not as critical as it is for the San Fernando Valley, where I see a lot of solar going up. So one issue I have is that the second meter, I forgot the technical term for that, sub-meter, thank you. The sub-meter program, they're supposed to do some promotion in the valley to try and see if we could expedite, get some discounts on the sub-meter for the large parcels that we have in the valley. We'd like to see that, some progress on that. Also, I see a lot of solar going up in the valley. And a concern I have is, are those solar companies vented through the Department of Water and Power? Or are they just putting up their shingle and then a year later we've got problems with it? Do they get, in other words, how are we regulating those, the solar factors that are coming in, the installations?
Sure. The solar contractors are required to be licensed by the state. The equipment that they're installing has to be approved by the California Energy Commission. So we're relying on the state to regulate that.
And we know there's always scams. Have we checked to make sure that they are living up to that, that they're installing what is required to be installed?
We inspect every single installation, and if there are issues or problems with that installation, we make sure they're fixed. We also have building and safety that inspects those installations as well. So every installation that's going into this in the city here is being done properly.
So every consumer has protection, because I can see something going fly by night, and then all of a sudden they start screaming at us, "Why did you let this happen?"
We're very concerned about that as
Have
well.
Have you had any of those yet?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
All right, so the headline is going to be water and power increasing rates. That's what the headline is going to be, because what we're hearing today is the projection, and I saw some media folks here when we started this meeting, their spin's going to be the rates are going up, folks. That's what they're going to talk about. Not that we're going to wait for the consulting firm and this, and that's what we need to caution people on, is that it's not happening now, but this is a projection, but you're not coming to council next week asking for these rates to take place. That's correct? You look puzzled.
No,
Today
we're not next week. We would,
presentation, yeah.
yeah, just a presentation now, but in August is when we'd come back.
But we're not going to have the PR consulting from the ratepayer advocate done by August.
No, the timeline does contemplate that.
PA Consulting is going to be done with its work in mid to late June. We will have a series of workshops on our summary of that analysis and our viewpoint and our recommendations.
Now, what if they want 10% and you say it's only worth 5%? Then what happens?
Then we get to discuss it.
Who wins?
You do.
So we make the final choice. I mean, I'm sure I don't question anything that you're saying. I know the system's falling apart. I know it's collapsing. I know we got water pipes that are breaking. I mean, there's no question that the 100-plus-year-old system needs to be updated, and technology is here today. It wasn't here yesterday. That I know. It's just that the folks that are paying the bill, the businesses, the residential, are all screaming, paying $4.50 for a gallon of gasoline, and now we're going to hit them with something else. That's the concerns that we get. I sympathize with what you're saying. You're in a tough position. Yes, Doctor?
We have to balance the overall level of service with the cost. Quite frequently, the most expensive power is the power you don't have.
Right. Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, a few questions. One, in terms of customers' bills, even with the rate increases, is there any chance to realistically keep many of our customers' bills the same through energy efficiencies? And are we focusing on helping them to do that?
We are, in fact, Councilmember Koretz. That is one of the reasons we're quite proud of the additional commitment we're making to the energy efficiency program. So we're more than doubling our investment in that area. And exactly as you point out, while rates are going to go up, there is the opportunity for people to keep their bills the same or lower if they take advantage of some of these programs. So we've designed an energy efficiency program that gives opportunities for all different types of customers to take control of their bill if they take advantage of some of these programs. So we're going to be even expanding the type of programs we offer, the funding for those programs, and making substantial additional financial commitment, going from about $55 million of spending this year to well over double that, and then it's going to continue to increase in the years ahead.
Very good. What's the department planning on doing to help small businesses and people on fixed incomes cope with the increases?
Well, as I had mentioned, in terms of how we've allocated these proposed rate increases, we've done that with an eye towards mitigating the impact on low-income customers to the greatest extent possible, because the department does offer a fixed discount of $8 per month on the electric bills. And due to a variety of concerns, we're not at liberty to increase that amount. So we have structured the rate increase so that if you're using a relatively small amount of power, as most of our lower income customers are, the percentage rate increase that they're going to face is quite limited. So we've done that to the greatest extent we can. On the small commercial customers, we also recognize they're hurting in this economy. The rate increase that we've proposed, we're not reviewing the cost allocation in terms of how the allocations are shifted between residential and commercial. So unfortunately, everyone kind of has to pay their way of this increase. But like on the residential side, there are a number of energy efficiency opportunities that we have available for them to still control their bill, even in light of the increasing rates.
So we don't have a particular program targeted to help small businesses?
We have the opportunities in our energy efficiency program, and the solar incentive program. There may be ways for them to take advantage of the feed-in tariff. So there are programs, but the rate increase, they too will have to pay their share.
Well, I'd certainly like to ask you to think about something a little more targeted, because it sounds like there are programs that anyone can make use of, but we haven't thought of anything additional to focus on helping small business. How can we ensure investment in energy efficiency, that investment leads to more jobs for LA residents? Are we looking at that, how we can make sure that we have some sort of preferences and that whatever we do spend our money on, that'll be creating new jobs in Los Angeles?
Councilmember Koretz, that has been an important consideration as we're looking at expanding the energy efficiency program. We want to make sure to the greatest extent possible that those dollars are spent here in LA. A number of the programs that we're proposing, that is a key consideration. For example, the whole house energy retrofit program, that is largely work that's going to be done by installers here in LA. So that and other programs, that has been a key consideration.
Okay, and obviously I'd encourage us to continue looking at ways that we can help this benefit our economy while we're in this process.
I should also mention, with respect to preferences and incentives to award work to LA-based businesses, we do have the 8% bid preference, so that should go to further encouraging the use of local contractors and suppliers.
Very good. And one last, maybe slightly more difficult question. I know that we're looking at a greater reliance on natural gas. Have we looked at the issue of fracking and the environmental impact of producing more natural gas in the local area? How much have we studied that, and are we considering that as we set that higher goal for natural gas?
We do look at that, and we work very closely with the natural gas industry in terms of extraction processes and impacts on the environment. Most of what that boils down to is what is the future cost of natural gas going to be, and that's really, from us as a consumer, that's what we look at. And so we work very closely again with the industry to take a look at what are regulations that are impacting the development and distribution of natural gas, and what will those impacts be on the costs to us. We also look at hedging opportunities. We look at gas field development opportunities. We actually have natural gas fields, or natural gas field ourselves that we operate and deliver our gas, so that we have some ability to control the pricing on natural gas. And so, but yeah, fracking is an issue that we are following very closely.
Well, I hope we're not looking at it just from the standpoint of costs, because my concern is the much greater costs if we have a result of groundwater contamination, or we actually much more seriously wind up triggering earthquakes because we don't fully understand this process. And don't wrap our arms around it. So I would hope as part of the process of getting more involved in natural gas, we would take a stronger look at that issue and make sure we're protecting our own safety.
Yeah, well, I got one more regarding the final analysis. Dr. Pickle, will you be taking that up to the various community groups, your analysis?
Yes, and I have been accompanying the DWP to most of its community meetings. Of the 8 community meetings so far, I've been able to attend or be represented. Out of the 8, I've only missed 1. In addition, I've spoken to 2 environmental groups, 1 neighborhood council group and MOU committee, the LA Business Council, and had 1 radio interview on the topic.
You don't want it to look like you are following their lead, that you are creating your own lead.
That's why I'm having separate presentations, but at the same time, I think it's important that I appear
At the assembly.
At the assembly. I do have a couple slides that I show at the end that explain what the ratepayer advocate does and how the office was created.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, one more question if I could. Just one more quick one. On your outreach meetings, have you gotten a sense that the public understands how our rates compare with some of the other cities that we've shown in these documents charging higher rates? Do they seem to be giving that credibility, or do they still have the same general idea that our rates are inflated and think they're higher than other places?
Well, we have shown those charts in the presentations, and I think they have appreciated that. Now, at the end of the day, people don't necessarily care what is happening elsewhere so much as my bill is going up, and I'm concerned about that. But getting to Councilmember Zine's question as to what the reaction has been to all of this, no one likes to see their bills go up. Nothing we're going to be able to say is going to make them necessarily feel better about that. But I think they do understand that these are things that we're required to do, and that we are very concerned about finding ways to keep these costs as low as we can while meeting these regulatory mandates. So I think people understand the message. They're still not happy about it, but they understand.
Yeah, just one more tag onto that is it reminds me that many of the neighboring jurisdictions, that businesses, they may pay more for utility, but they don't have a gross receipts tax on their sales. So some of that is maybe their rates are a little higher, but they're not paying some of the taxes that they're paying for LA. So sometimes you got to balance those factors. So you folks are in a very difficult position. So we empathize with you. You too, with the maps.
The hardest part is carrying maps. Thank you very much. I think for me, I'm just interested. I know we're kind of looking at the forest in terms of our needs for the future, right? Where we want to be with geothermal, where we want to be with renewables. What does it mean to get off these the ones through cooling? But we're kind of looking at it from afar, right? These are our targets. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to raise the rates to help us get there. But the details about exactly how much of that big demand out there to move in that direction, what are we exactly buying with these adjustments? But that's something that perhaps we get into another day. But I do at this time want to direct, this is a note and file. One note and file, this item is just a presentation, but I do want to direct, if DWP, let me put it this way, CAO and CLA work with our ratepayer advocate to identify some support for the water support analysis he will need if we were to stick with that timeline in the last slide. As the ratepayer advocate mentioned, and Mr. Pickle mentioned, he has the support he needs for the energy, for the power. Now, the water is what he's concerned about, so we want to make sure that if we were to stick to that timeline, the CLA and CIO, if you could work with Mr. Pickle's office to come up with some options about how we could give him the resources he needs until he gets a permanent staff there for that. And
We'll get
can we get that as a report back
Sure can.
As soon as possible to this committee. We'll
Yeah.
figure that out.
We'll get that going.
Okay, and that's it. And we just got one public comment card. Thank you very much.
Who's the comment?
Stephanie Taylor, Green LA Coalition.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm representing the Green LA Coalition, the Water Committee, and we've been following the DWP rate increases for a while. So members of the committee include 3 people: Heal the Bay, Food and Water Watch, the Hollywood Beautification Team, Southern California Watershed Alliance. And I just want to take this opportunity to just lay out really, really briefly for you some of the our position on why the city must dramatically increase our investments for local water supply, and just really in bulleted briefly, because we'll save money and local water will save ratepayers money into the future. We need to increase our reliability. We must not depend on the sort of volatile rate increases from MWD, and we also, as you pointed out, local projects equals local jobs. And then lastly, local water supply is both good for the environment and good for the future. So we also, we agree that it's going to be extremely important that we have the same level of information and analysis that's for water as we currently have for power. And so we're very concerned about that as well. And so just wanted to also note that we'll be reaching out to your offices, and we've already met with some of your staff, but we plan on reaching out to your offices and the other council members as well to see how we can work together to be sure that the city sort of stays on this path. And as you noted, that we really do need to invest now, both in renewable energy and in local water, and that we have to prepare ourselves for adequate investments over the long term and into the future. And we want to be sure that we're able to work with the city so that we can lay the proper foundation so that we have the revenue and the that we need to make sure that we have local water. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Believe that concludes. The action on that last item is no file, no objection to that. And then that concludes our meeting. Thank you very much.